Okay, good, good. So, hello everyone. I hope everyone can hear me well. Uh, I'm now projecting from Kiev, from the comfort of my home, and I would like to thank everyone who's being present on this little lecture about self-disclosure. And what we are going to talk on this lecture today is we're going to talk about food. So let's talk about food. And before we jump start and continue, I assume and hope you're not hungry anymore because of the lunch you have taken. So what I would like to ask you guys is how exactly you choose between different types of food. And obviously, you know, there is a different types of food like this, and also food like this. And there are different kinds of consumers, but some of us always have, at least once in our life, have ever seen the food, the disgusting food that we didn't want to eat. And sometimes even we have seen this food after we purchased it and it was well packaged. So what happens and why do we actually talk about food requirements? So food requirement is the very interesting subject of study. And for the last 30 years, what we have been doing better and better as a society, we have been learning on how to regulate food using the market power and using the government and using different players of industry to make our food safer. Why is that, and why am I actually talking about this and about this process and difficulty in choice? Because we all want to make sure we uh, we have a safe products in front of us. Today, deep learning and AI has seen a huge number of success stories. Uh, we have seen that AI has beat human lawyers in their game. AI has beat humans in lip reading. We have seen articles about reading comprehension or doctors in cancer spotting being less effective than machine learning algorithms for image recognition and object recognition. We know that we're able to produce a very qualitative uh, content, for example, using the GTP3 model. We know that we're able to do a really good generation of images based on the source object and the model object, like a real-time facial reenactment. This is a great example. We know that we can use AI to mimic any voice, build text. So the general pattern for today's news around AI is very often brought to something like this: AI beats human in something. But we have definitely seen failures, and these failures are also very different in nature, like identity and security failures because of the low quality algorithms. We have seen the generative networks that has been turning the people who were dressed up into nudes. We have seen the robotic failures because of the safety, because of the bed safety uh, safety problem. We have seen the robotic, the self-driving robot that was meant to do policing was rolling over a child. We have seen Tai, who was trained to do racial commands in Twitter, even though the algorithms were perfectly okay. But we know that the Thai AI was shut down after almost 6 hours of operation because it was doing not something what it was supposed to do. We know Google Cloud Natural Language Processing API that has been biased and against race and gender. We know problems with self-driving cars. Uh, but in general, what I want to talk about today is how all this is actually fitting the framework of AI ethics and break several myths that we are all today in front of, and some of us have misconceptions about. So first of all, I want to say that AI ethics is definitely not about this. So it's not about Hollywood movies, or it is not about human superintelligence, or it's not about human level of intelligence of machines. What it is, however, is about a certain requirements that we can bring to machines, and how we can make machines follow these requirements so that the consumers are better off. And today, what we're seeing is that there is a certain landscape of regulation, because different governmental bodies and even non-governmental institutions are issuing a so-called guidelines. But before I jump to this topic, what I would like to invite you to do is to jump to a Slido screen that you probably have. To do this, you can use your mobile phone and take a snapshot of this QR code, or go to slido.com and follow this and enter this password, LvDS 2020-self-disclosure-101. And by doing this, you would be able to enter the poll. I guess everyone here in the data science summer school already knows how to communicate using Slido, and how to ask and answer question using Slido. Right now, what I'd like to invite you to do is to jump into the Slido and answer a question: is what affects your purchase decision when you try a new product in the supermarket? This is very much related to our further discussion in today's lecture. So I would like to see if what kind of answers we can get from we can get to this question. So thank you. Meanwhile, those of you who are currently in Slido, I want to remind you that this Slido is meant for us to collect questions as well. So if you do have questions over time, I would like I'd be coming back to those questions and then asking them, or stopping from time to time uh, to be able to fulfill your curiosity during this uh, short period of our acquaintance today. So what we are seeing today is that price is one of the big differentiators for sure. We do see quality, but quality is pretty vague word. So those who continue answering, I would like you guys to think about what manifests quality for you. So what exactly does it mean, qualitative product? And if you try to dissect or decipher the word quality for you, it would be interesting to see what is brought. So there is a brand quality. What I assume is that it's how well it is known and what the reputation is. I see the comparison, so I guess you have a way to compare the products. I see packaging. It's I hope from what I understand means visual attractiveness. There is familiarity. So I guess there is something that you have already tried. So you're looking for something very similar to what you have already tried. There is freshness and production country. What I think it means is you're interested in sources of ingredients. Yeah, ingredients come again and again. What I also see, yeah, there is interest. So there is curiosity that is the a source of trial. So we all probably want to try the product and see the product, if the product will actually satisfy us. So I'm going to jump back to the presentation, and we can continue this filling in. We will have a glance later on what the quality means for you. It's very entertaining to look at how a global community of learners is filling up this slide, and we're going to come back to this to talk about the ingredients after we talk about the landscape of the regulation. So what do we mean by regulating the quality of products? By regulating, we actually mean for introducing 4 types of boundaries. And as Lawrence Lessig in his Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace remarked, he categorized all kind of regulations or all kind of boundaries that we can create into 4 groups that are architecture, laws, norms, and market. And if I can make an example of what all this means, I'd probably refer to a daily, what we know in our daily life is a safety example when we think about trying to prohibit a person of crossing the road in the wrong place. Let's imagine we have a highway where we have a lot of cars that are passing by on a high speed, and we do have a pedestrian that needs to cross this road. We have different ways of limiting pedestrian in crossing this road, including in crossing this road and being harmed by cars. So what we want to eventually do, we want to make sure that pedestrians are safe and the cars are safe. What we can do, we can of course regulate this by law. We can penalize every car and every pedestrian for crossing the law. We can put them in jail, or we can create a big fines both for pedestrian and cars. What we also can do, we can regulate by norms. For example, by shaming person that is crossing that is crossing the highway in the wrong place. What we can do here is we can definitely make sure that society doesn't accept bad behaviors, in quotes, bad behaviors, whatever that means. What we also can do, we can limit the whole system and disable people crossing the road by building a certain architecture. What we can do, we can build a high fence around that, and we can build a bridge so that people won't cross the road using the ground level, but will take the bridge or will take the elevator. And what we also can do in this kind of situation, we can motivate people, or we can motivate cars. So an example for this would be some kind of market behavior that we can generate. For example, we can make it attractive to cross the road in the right place. Even though it could be a little bit longer, we can create such conditions where people would be more eager to spend time because it will be financially beneficial for them. For example, they can purchase something, or they can sell something on the road, on their way of crossing the road. And this kind of thinking is a prevailing thinking, and I would refer to 2 of these boundaries as so-called classical boundaries, and two of those that are non-classical boundaries. In classical, I would refer to laws and norms. These are the ways most governments act. The new ways the non-classical way the governments would try to intervene in the situation is to work on architectures and work on markets. And this is another approach to regulation. You will see why we're coming back to this. But before we continue, what probably some of you have heard already, some of you who have visited, who are interested in AI regulation, is that there are actually multiple different sources of regulation, multiple of different guidelines that has been issued up to date. So for example, if we talk about 1 year ago mapping of AI regulation, we see this picture. This picture has changed up to now. So we see some countries that have more than 15 regulations. For example, the United States up to this date, up to June 2019, had 21 regulation. Today, this number is much more. And if we want to talk about specific regulation, we'd be able to jump in, and I will make an example of the European regulation issued by high-level expert group that is called Ethical Guidelines for Trustworthy AI. What this guideline is actually doing, it is taking seven values or 7 principles, and it is trying to instill these values by suggesting that every AI system should make sure that every of those principle is fulfilled. Let me now talk about every of those principles in more details, so that we understand what we're talking about on the example of AI high-level expert group. And what I'm going to do next, I'm going to talk about the landscape and how this all joined together. So the first one is human agency and oversight. When we talk about human agency and oversight, what is most important here to understand is that we want to have AI systems that are predictable, and to which we can come back and ask them about if a decision was wrongly made. What human agency and oversight is requiring, it is requiring an individual for whom the automated decision making is made to be able to still object this decision. Technical robustness and safety, I guess it's a very straightforward example. We don't want AI to cause direct harm, for example, for health or for freedom. Privacy and data governance, in this domain, European Commission is referring to the ability of the system at whole to protect individual and to enable the right of individual to control his private data. When we talk about transparency, what is meant here by the European Commission group is that AI should be transparent in the way it functions and in the way it's built. In the way it functioned, what it means is that we need to be able to trace back the decisions that is done by the AI system, and to understand and to have as much as possible understanding about the factors that made decisions the way it is. When we talk about how the systems are built, what we need to be able to know is we need to understand what kind of data was fed in the system for training, what kind of algorithms we use, for example, and other aspects. When we talk about diversity and non-discrimination, well, some of you have already signed up for today's panel for non-discrimination, where we will talk about non-discrimination in more details. But here, specifically, what's important is that one group of one
Nikita, I don't hear you. Is everything okay with your sound?
Yeah, I'm fixing the sound. I hope it.
Okay, now I hear you.
Okay, I'm very sorry. I'm coming back to a presentation. Just a second. So coming back to fairness, what we want to make sure is that the minorities are not offended in any way. When we talk about societal and environmental well-being, we want to make sure that, for example, the machine doesn't harm the environment. And here, a huge research on energy spending by algorithmic systems is made. And when we talk about accountability, this is the requirement that is very, very widespread, for example, in financial systems today. But what we definitely want to make sure is that every decision that is made by machine learning system is also traceable, and that there is a person in the end who could be made responsible. It's either the owner of the company or the developer of algorithm, or the product owner, or the data protection officer. And as you see here, the ethical guidelines for of the high-level expert group, they're talking mainly about seven pillars or seven requirements. But the reality is that there are so many of those pillars, and there are at least 50 of those pillars, and around 90 different types of regulations. So for example, what Hagendorf did, he has analyzed different type of guidelines, including European high-level expert group guideline, and he looked at different principles. In his research, there are 18 principles, but what he did, he normalized them. But there are much more of them, and he looked at those guidelines issued both by corporations and supranational structures like IEEE or Microsoft or DeepMind or Google. Another notable work that has been done, and this is a pretty recent one, by Mark Ryan and Robert Stahl. We collaborated with them on a project called Sherpa. What was done here is that the hierarchy of this values that has to be controlled by AI, by the developer of AI system to maintain the ethical behavior of AI system was categorized, and it's a very good work. So I suggest everyone who is in this call to have a look at this work. But what I want to bring today is a slightly different point of view on guidelines, regulation, and how this all feed to the values that we have been talking about. As you can see, there are many players that exist on the market that are presenting their guidelines, And unfortunately, there is no common language yet. And this is what we're working on in Open Ethics, is to build a common language for this, to unify the guidelines in such a way that every developer will know exactly what the guideline is talking about. We're taking a different approach, and this approach is taking from the food industry. And why I have been making an example from the food industry is because there is a misconception that is related to the food industry, that food industry is highly regulated. It is well regulated, but the reason why we do consume safe food is not because the government is playing a very high role, or the certification institutions are playing a very good role with that. No, that's not true. What is true, however, is that the market power in the food industry is very, very high. And it is very high because the standard exists for a disclosure of the food product. So when we purchase a bottle in the supermarket, we all do have an understanding of the ingredients. We even have an understanding of how to recycle the bottles in some cases. So we also have an understanding of the sources of the product. And in some cases, we even do have an understanding of the whole supply chain of the food. What is very strange, however, is that we have been consuming IT products for the last 30 years as consumers, but we have nothing like that in IT products. For example, if we want to sign up for, let's say, Gmail, to use an email address, to use an email box, we have to go through 32 pages of terms and conditions and 29 pages of privacy policy. That absolutely doesn't make sense for a majority of users. If you ask the lawyer what does that mean, the lawyer would probably tell you that he needs to do a legal analysis, and this is ridiculous when it comes to the end user. No end user is going to sign and do the legal analysis for a simple product. And this talks only about data processing and privacy. When we talk about automated decision making today, we have a very, very limited understanding of what is the cause of this decision. Specifically, this is even more important when we talk about the decision making with the legal effects, or decision making with the financial effects, or decision making with health effects. The stance that we're taking here at Open Ethics is a bottom-up approach. And specifically, we're not designing or creating one another guidance to work on AI regulation, or to suggest a certain behavior to user. We are bringing a common language to talk about ethics. And we're doing this in such a way that we can protect both consumers by helping them to understand what's inside the product, and to help producers so that producers can disclose in a very standardized way. The picture today that we have on the market is that 77% of the devices and services use some form of AI. This is even an outdated data from late 2019. And 42% of consumers don't trust AI. So almost half of the population don't trust AI. However, everyone is using this. And the stance that we're taking here is in looking at precisely at what we already know well from other industries, and specifically food industries. When you purchase a product, you disclose ingredients, you disclose the allergen, the safety measures. You talk about sell-by date, you talk about calorie intake and proteins, carbs, and fats, about manufacturer information. Some of you have highlighted that the brand has a high importance. We talk about identification mark, for example, making sure that the product is not a counterfeit product. And we can talk about the mobile tagging because we need to know the supply chain of the ingredients. So what if we take it and try to bring this to a real IT product? We all know the labels, and what we started with a solution, an open source solution, where every developer can label their products for 3 very basic pillars. And these pillars are the algorithms, the training data, and the decision space. So I guess for a majority of you, training data and algorithms are not something new, but what we mean when we talk about decision space is following. Imagine you have a simple system, as simple as a traffic light. And you probably know that traffic light has a limited set of states, total of 5 states. We have a red light, we have red and yellow, we have a green light, we have separately yellow light, and we have a different state when the traffic light doesn't work at all. This is so-called restricted decision space. Only this 6 decisions or only the 6 states are possible for such an autonomous system. Even imagine it doesn't have any AI in it. When the traffic light doesn't work, every driver on the road knows what to do. We all have learned rules of driving, or some of you. We all know what to do when there is no traffic light. But suddenly, if the traffic light would shine with the blue color, no one would know what to do when the traffic light is shining with the blue color. If you know what to do for this example, let me know. If you're in the regular road, this means that disclosing the decision space for any autonomous system is a good prerequisite for making safe ecosystems where everyone knows what is predictable and what is not. However, we have also unrestricted decision spaces. This is a scenario where we actually don't know what kind of output the system could do. The example for this is a GTP3 model that can output any kind of textual information, and that could generate different amounts of states. And these different amounts of states we can feed in another system, and we wouldn't know how exactly should we be processing this textual states. What we, however, know is that the output would be of the same typology, so it's going to be a textual information. So how do we look at that? We're looking mostly at AI product owners, and the AI product owners is a specific group of users that are creating or owning the product as a whole. It could be in a company executive, or it could be a lead developer, but in the end, it's a person who is responsible for the overall overall result. The graph that you're seeing here is the global report by McKinsey Institute, and it's obviously different, but we stopped counting at some point because the number of AI apps is growing very fast. And it's growing notably in 3 economic blocks: the European bloc, the United States, and China. So the impact that is meant to be created here is to build responsible companies who will disclose and therefore build trust, and educate users who would actually make an informed choices. And we start with label and bring this to the platform that will eventually give those users a choice, so that they would be able to see those companies who disclose more. So here I'm showing you a simple slide with print screen that actually demonstrates the disclosure technologies that we're building. And what we're doing right now, we're transforming this technology into a machine readable code. This is going to be an open source standard that every one of you could command and contribute to. So if you're interested, I really invite you to contact me after the lecture, and I would be thrilled to tell you the story and how you can contribute. So what if we can bring transparency, more transparency, and if AI system can get a nutrition fact? This is how we approach it from the very beginning by bringing open ethics data. We brought open ethics maturity model, so the model that will help companies to evaluate their level of openness. The next step is, however, very different, and that's the very reason of why open ethics called open ethics. Some of you who have previously taken a philosophy or ethics course know that every ethics is a subjective measure. Every community may have its cultural code or may have its own norms and ways of making decisions. We also know that if we take just one country as an example, we would probably have multiple communities in this one country. What would it mean to create, to instill a certain value sets to the whole country? What if we would say to the whole country that everyone has to obey paternalistic rules? Or what kind of behaviors we would achieve if we would push everyone in the country to obey and to believe in the same religion, regardless of what the norms of a certain small minority communities are. And what we're seeing here is that in different situations, we may see the ethical clashes where in one community or in one type of ethics, the decision would be a good decision, and in another type of ethics, the decision would be a bad decision. So here I'm presenting only three different kinds of ethical models, but there are much more. There are dozens of them, and the reason for that is a very cultural reasons, because those who try to formalize them and put them into a certain practice, we're coming from different beliefs. So how can we formalize the approach to belief, and instead of instilling one or another type of belief, allow people to choose an ethical framework that they are up to? There has been multiple open projects, and those of you who are in scientific domain know very well the open access principle of sharing the data and making it reproducible, but also making it available to the end users. Most of you know what open data means, what open source means, and what open AI has been tackling. But can we tackle and go towards open ethics? What would that mean? Should we introduce open metrics, open point of views, and make an open decisions? So how can we define what point of view is, and what is the data set that would depict the point of view? And how should we use this to train an AI system? Should we need an AI consortium that will account for different points of view and would able for us to deliberately say which kind of ethical framework this or another decision belong to? What metrics should we create to evaluate AI decisions? So to approach these questions, we have came up with with a model that is called Open Ethics Vector. So what Open Ethics Vector is basically a set of principles that one or another autonomous system may pertain to, or may have as ingredients. And what we do know is that for one or another point of view, for example, if I would like to ensure maximal safety, I would probably take this point of view. But if I would ask another person would talk about non-subversion, compassion, and cross-national security. So instilling the whole set of value doesn't seem very, very much realistic. However, being able to maintain some of those value sets in a certain hierarchy is more realistic. So we came up with a model that may allow us to evaluate every system according to the alternatives that it is presenting, based on the category of the value sets, so that the user that is looking for a specific decision-making, type of decision-making, would be able to choose in between one or another alternative, picking up the alternative that will allow and that will be aligned with his own values. So what we did so far in the last months in our open community, we've built the website, we've built an open ethics label. We are now working on launching a platform and doing community activities that we call Open Ethics Series. And on our roadmap, what we want to do is basically to bring the disclosure to a new level, the same level as we have when we go to the supermarket and purchase products. We want every user to be able to, let's say, scan the product instead of having to read all the descriptions. And what we want to do, we want to allow users to select a product of a specific type, of a specific value set that align to the value set of the whole user. And to do this, what is needed to be done is to be able to construct information about how do we label the data, because the data, as we all know, is a source of the majority of biases and historical prejudice that we say that community who labels the data have. Therefore, what is needed to be done is to control the whole supply chain of the data, from the upstream data processor to the downstream data processor, including the information about who labeled the data set, meaning not the person per se, but what kind of characteristics and beliefs this person had, so that he or she did label in a specific way. On this point, I would like to close the lecture and open it for questions. I definitely invite all of you to follow the updates on open ethics and join it, because it's an open community where everyone can contribute, either contributing to a transparency protocol, or in helping us to design the labeling part, or in launching of the portal. I want to invite everyone to join a Discord channel. So this invitation is valid. This is a public group where people join. And of course, feel free to contact me anywhere you feel comfortable, either in Twitter or by email or in any other social media. So now I'm going to close the sharing, and we probably will come back to Slido so that I can address some of the questions. So I'm seeing right now one single question, and it's rather a comment that says the sound became worse. Yeah, I had my I had a problem with my headphones. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions? So please let me know if you would like me to give any comments to the presentation, or there is anything that you would like to get clarity on. We will wait a little bit and I'll provide the contact details so that people will still be able to see the contact details. And I'm keeping my eyes on the questions.
We should wait 5 minutes because there is a delay between Zoom and YouTube.
Sure. So I'll be waiting for a couple of minutes. So there is a request to resend the links to Slack. So all the links and presentation as well is going to be shared in LvDS Data Science Summer School Slack. Positive. There is a question: what are the current activities of the Open Ethics initiative in Ukraine? Open Ethics is a global initiative, so it doesn't belong to Ukraine. Neither it belongs to any other country. What, however, is done is that Open Ethics conducts Open Ethics Series, is a set of panels where we invite renowned speakers, international researchers, and people who work in the industry within the different aspects of ethics, say privacy or impact assessment, or cybersecurity, or bias. And what we do, we invite those speakers and conduct various thematical events in which everyone can participate, including people from Ukraine. What I would be interested to do is, of course, to collaborate with local institutions where we can set up where we can set up an information policies, and we can help developers from different degrees or either doing data science or building autonomous systems to disclose information about their product in such a way that it doesn't infringe intellectual property, so it doesn't in any way avoids company to be competitive, but at the same time benefits the end user. So if you do represent anyone from such an organization in Ukraine, I would be very happy to talk to you and to set up such a collaboration. Transparency of AI protocol versus safety. Don't bet, guys, can break the security system with AI applied, knowing how it works. It's a very good question. So what we definitely want to make sure is that we do not undermine the safety of the product. And knowing that that a certain system uses a certain open source algorithm doesn't make the system less secure. Moreover, what we have seen so far is that publishing if you're using a downloadable software, for example, publishing the fact that it uses open source, it is the requirement of majority of open source licensing. What we need to make sure is that we protect such systems from adversarial attacks. There has been publications existing that described how we can, if we get the access to machine learning models, for example, how we can extract personal identifiable information from such models. But this is definitely a question of security, because we're not motivating everyone to share the models themselves. What we're talking about is to make sure that we clearly share the outputs that the model is doing. I hope I answered the question. Any real-world example of implementation of transparency protocol in production? Transparency protocol is not yet live, so I would like to see the implementation as soon as we get it live. Right now, it's in request for comments in open source community. So it's not yet live. What is live is open ethics label. So for example, you can look at the implementation of open ethics label. It's a very, very reduced part of the transparency protocol on Pocket Confident website. So I'd be able to provide the link of how it looks and what it describes. How to ensure the discussion and regulation would propagate worldwide? This is a very big and powerful question to which I do not have an answer. However, I do have some elements. The element is, the element number one is that let me take the analogy again from the food industry. What we do know is that there are organizations such as World Trade Organization. What World Trade Organization does, it makes sure that the trade is free and that countries are not creating competitive disadvantages for each other, and that they're allowing trade without fining or taxing a specific type of good just because they want to have a protectionist policy. What the World Trade Organization does, they work with standard organizations to ensure that the standards are kept. What we know is that every country is going to probably pertain to their own standard, and that probably the standards for that will work in one country will not necessarily be a part of another country. What we also know is that as soon as technology will cross boundary, and for example, for European Union, this concerns every EU customer, not necessarily a product that is hosted in the European Union. So as soon as the product becomes available and the European customer could use the product becomes automatically liable to be a part of GDPR as one of the recent examples. If I can call it recent, it's a 2-year. It was launched 2 years ago. So what we can do as consumers and as developers, we can first make sure that there is a common language to talk about our products and ethics in our products. And this is very much like machine readable terms. Everyone who has ever built a product probably had to design one or another sort of terms and conditions. What we are building here is we're building a way to these terms and conditions to become machine readable, so that products can interact, so that AI products can interact with each other. Because we know that more and more we're getting into the era of microservices, when one product is serving another product and it's serving another product, and we are building the whole chain of vendors that are supporting, and the user is touching the very end data controller, while this data controller has multiple sub vendors. Hope this does make sense. What is the reception of open ethics, if any, from industry? So we're going to start working with industry as soon as we will have a transparency protocol. What we are currently is we're negotiating with organizations who directly work with startups and technology products, so that instead of us, open ethics, being a central place for generating an ethical label, we would be able to create a network where such organizations could help startups or technology products to label their products. So if Carlos, if by any chance you are working with such organization, or you are part of this organization, please do contact us. We would be very interested to talk about this and help this technology to proliferate as soon as the transparency protocol is ready. Are there many cross-cultural differences in understanding what AI fairness and ethical AI to take into account when building universal set of regulations? Let me dissect this question into several questions. So first of all, I want to make sure that we understand the concept of ethics in the same way, and that we're not trying to build a universal set of regulations, because most likely either the set will be not workable, because we will try to find a common denominator, and this common denominator for every kind of community, for what's allowed in every kind of community, is going to be so small that we're not going to get any benefits from such a regulation. The first question is more interesting. Is there a cross-cultural differences? Today in our seminar, for example, for AI fairness, we will discuss different definitions of fairness. And there definitely are multiple differences, and they are present not even cross-cultural, but intracultural. So we can define fairness in multiple different ways. And what open ethics is striving to do is, instead of instilling and saying which kind of fairness we should use, what we can do is to disclose which exactly the decision-making system is using, so that the user would be able to understand what is the source of potential bias in such a system, and use it for their own benefits or risks, so that the decision that they make when starting to use the product will be an informed decision. If we talk about cultural difference between ethics, there is no such thing as ethical AI. Ethical AI is like talking about ethical AI is like talking about good decisions. And good decisions, they don't exist in isolation. What good decisions exist in a certain system of coordinate. This is a physicist's point of view on it. When we want to define a decision, it would probably look more or less like a vector, when it takes into account different values, and those values were more prioritized for this decision would make a difference. Because for one person, this decision would look like a good decision because it prioritizes his own priority, and the values are aligned. While for another person, exactly the same decision would be not the exact decision that he would value, because it will go against his priority. So disclosure is probably the first step on this in this regard. If we can talk about the same properties of the products using the same language, probably we would be able to educate users more on what those properties are, and the users would be able to choose. I think what's important to note here is also that top-down regulation in multiple fields is a necessary condition, like in healthcare or military or education. However, top-down regulation may not be a sufficient solution, because again, we're talking to different norms, to different groups with different cultural codes, where those regulations may either go against certain sets of values, or these regulations would not even touch the necessity for those values, and therefore the products are users would not have a chance to choose the products that they like. How do you incentivize open ethics? Could you bring more I would appreciate if you could bring more context to this question, and how do you incentivize open ethics? So if we're talking about incentivizing companies to do the disclosure, my answer would be right now it's a trust between a company and the user. More you disclose, more trust we'll get. If we talk about the future plans, it is the market power. So more users are educated, more users would be able to deal with asymmetry that currently exists on the market. Today, consumers know absolutely nothing about how their data is processed and how the automated decisions are made. Therefore, they're blind. So the incentive here, when the proliferation will reach the critical mass, is not to be shifted out by the competition, because users will trust more those companies who disclose more, like it's happening with food products. Today, mostly when you go to a supermarket, because the top-down regulation doesn't work doesn't cover everything. We have labels on the products and we have descriptions on the products. Otherwise, we would have blank products with just the naming and the brand on it. We do need the product descriptions so that the users would understand the benefits and the risks that they're taking. Coming back to your question again, how do you incentivize open ethics? If you talk about an open source contribution, so how do we incentivize open source contribution? Right now, we do not have a standard way to incentivize. Usually people commit or contribute to open source just because they think it's a valid thing to do. So I guess this question is pretty open for discussion. I'd be very open for ideas as well. Who is better at adopting or discussing AI ethics, public sector or private companies? So let me try to address this question by jumping back to the slide that we have seen. Here on this slide, we have two axes between the regulations that are incentivizing or protecting businesses more, and the organizations that are more focused on protecting users. On another axis is a top-down regulation, meaning it will work the way we said and not in a different way. And the bottom-up regulation that is trying to that is going from the bottom up. So, for example, if we talk about Google's and IBM guidelines, they are supporting companies, businesses, right, who are building something on their platform. Interestingly, Microsoft is taking a middle ground here by both incentivizing those who work on their own ecosystem, and also trying to find the balance between top-down and bottom-up regulations. They also, from what I know, are in collaboration with several governmental structure on exactly on how to regulate the impact of AI. We have a very interesting position, for example, of Mozilla Foundation, Future of Life Institute. There are more that are trying to be on the user side and more on the bottom-up side. We also have a clearly European approach that is a top-down approach, staying heavily on the user side. So, for example, ICO is also protecting users, but it's also very much trying to make sure that the competition is not detained or is not limiting the growth of the companies. European Commission, high-level expert group, the French group called CNIL, the German group, the Netherlands group, NEN. They're all working on the user sides very much. And what exists here, unfortunately, is that companies do fear the regulator, and it's probably from the commercial perspective, it's probably a good thing, because we see companies following the regulation. But the bad side of it is that the companies would check boxes, and this leads to what we call privacy washing or ethics washing, where companies just doing what is required, but not more. Not because they want to, but probably because this is the minimal requirement that allow them to be present on the market. That's my elements to the question: what is better, and who is better? There is no one best player. Any more questions? Any more questions? The new question is, will we see AI ethical experts as a new profession in the future? My answer is no, because this is not about the future. This is the situation today. We already do see data protection officer and AI ethics experts as a profession. So it's already a profession. It's not about the future. We'll probably see the growth, but it's already a profession. We see philosophers engaging in the questions. We see ethicists engaging in the question. We see technologists engaging in the issue because they believe this is the right thing to do. This is the right domain to think about. How do we treat individuals? How do we make sure societies develop without harming each other? And how do we make sure that there is an economic growth despite all of that? Let's see if we have any more questions. I have one question. I'd like to, because I have almost no touch with the audience except except being exposed to questions. So I would like to know whether we do have people from different countries. Maybe Maria or Nadia will help me to ask this question to the audience to see where people are coming from. Could you help me to launch the poll, Maria?
Yes, one moment, yes.
The new question came in, and it is, if a company considers AI ethics in product development, but the client is not interested in spending time on ethical questions, what would you suggest? How to persuade the client that ethics is important? Well, first of all, I have to say that it would be very difficult to persuade. So if from the very start of the conversation, you as a product developer or as a consultancy company do not see that the ethics is a common ground of your conversation, and only the financial or aspect or speed of your development, this probably wouldn't change. What however could be your argument in this conversation is the regulatory aspect. The regulation is coming in 2021. This regulation is coming in the European, the more stronger regulation is coming from the European Commission. The new regulations are going to be definitely issued in the United States, and other countries will follow. So the question is whether you're going to be putting ethical consideration from the very beginning, and it will decrease the budget, or as a potential, the company is going to be fined. Today, for example, in GDPR, we already have a regulation that limits the way we can process personal identifiable information in automatic way. This is Article 15, Article 22 of GDPR. What probably you would like to make sure is that your customer understands the consequences of not following the existing regulation. What you would probably want want to give him as an argument is that he would probably need to do this anyway at some point. So it's better to start. It's better to start early. What you also can give him, and I think this is even more important, is that ethical consideration is not a half-year project. You can do sprint by sprint, improving the way the product works for the end user, and therefore being not a cost for the product, but something that will bring value. If you put the user in the center of the product, the product will always, the product metrics are going to always benefit it. If you will put user at center of the product and will design the product in such a way that user will feel that this product could be trusted, that the developer could be trusted, that the owner could be trusted, this is going to build a reputation, and reputation is something that is very long-lasting compared to a quick wins that are brought by products that are launched fast. This is my point of view. Yeah, Maria, do we already have a poll to see? Can I share the poll?
Oh, 1 second, 1 second. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm activating the screen with the poll where we will see a new one.
Yes, yes, one moment.
I'm really thankful for the questions that you guys are submitting. They're all deep and well thought questions, and I have to say some of them just don't have answers right now. So I would be very happy to give answers to some of them, but very, very good questions.
Do you see the poll? Are you seeing the poll?
Yes, I guess we need to jump to a second poll somehow. Yeah. So can you write the country from where are you? Yeah. So if those who are still in the call could give me an idea, I would love to see the coverage and where people are coming from. Yeah, it's very interesting. So the majority, I am seeing that majority are coming from Ukraine. Very much, and I'm very happy that Ukraine is well represented here. And we see United Kingdom and Russian Federation. So we have 12 people in the call, right? Or we do have more? 13, Turkey. Thank you very much for giving me this feedback. I will check if we've got new questions. So no new questions. Before closing this call, for those of you who are interested in AI fairness and non-discrimination, so I want to remind you that there is an event that is happening later today in 1.5 hours. We're going to have a panel. So we're not going to have a one person speaking, but rather a discussion that is going to happen around bias and non-discrimination. So if you haven't registered yet on Eventbrite, I suggest you to go and visit the event link and go through the registration process for this event, because the event link is going to be redistributed after you registered to your email directly. So again, thanks a lot for today's lecture. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to stay in touch and be open for any kind of conversation you want to follow. I'd be happy to talk more about the story, about the open ethics, and how this could be brought to the industry in a broad sense. Thank you a lot for today, and I wish you all good things and good learnings in the data science summer school hosted by UKU. Thank you a lot again. Goodbye.
Thank you, Nikita.
Thank you, Nikita. Thank you. Bye.